Hey everybody, Madison Quinn here from KFGO. I'm here to share another veteran interview with you guys. I was really happy doing the ones before with the two World War II pilots. If you haven't seen those, check it out here. I'll link it right here in this video. It was great to be at the Fargo Air Museum again. They have hosted many Blue Angels history nights, and that's where I was at gathering this interview. This guy, his name is Gil Rud. He grew up in Portland, North Dakota, graduated from NDSU. He's recently actually named an honored alum at NDSU. He is a former boss flight leader of the U.S. Navy Blue Angels from 1986 to 1988. Not only that, he served as a commanding officer of an aircraft carrier, the USS Constellation. He later worked for Boeing and was one of the key people in the development of the F-18 Super Hornets, which is what the Blue Angels fly right now. I could really go on and on about Gil's service in the Navy. He entered the Navy in May of 1967. He earned his Navy Wings of Gold in December of 1968. He compiled 57 combat missions flying light attack aircraft during the Vietnam War. A very interesting fact, this included a mission in support of the evacuation of Saigon in April of 1975, right? That very famous photo. Gil was there and he was flying in protection of all those helicopters leaving the embassy. He flew 5,600 hours and completed 786 aircraft carrier landings. Now, without further ado, here's Gil Rud.
So I grew up on a farm. I was born in a town, Mayville, North Dakota, but then lived on the farm the rest of the time, hardly ever went to town. Spent most of my time around the Lutheran church out there, which was called Bung, spelled B-A-N-G, but named Bung. The churches were all named after churches in Norway, you know, and so and then when they immigrated, they came over and did that. And then I went to a one-room school with all 8 grades taught by one teacher. And believe me, she still had the discipline to handle us. And then I went from there and finally went to high school. And our first day at high school, my friend over here, Richard Fuglerberg, would tell you this. We came into town and all of our siblings had already graduated from high school, so we didn't have the, really didn't have the gouge, we call it, you know, that to what it was going to be like. So we showed up with lunch buckets. And of course they had cafeteria, nobody had lunch buckets, right? So we looked like what we were, a couple of hick boys, you know, from the country. And by the way, we arrived in a Model A Ford, 1932 Model A Ford. And as we started down a little hill into Portland there, my buddy says, you know, I wonder if the town folks are up yet. And he said, well, they sure soon will be. And he retards the spark on that old Model A, and we banged our way all the way down the hill into town.
Nothing
and
like
so,
a wake-up call.
That's right. And so they then labeled us the Bung Bombers.
Let's transition into, I was reading up and you went to college, right, for ag business, something like that, right?
Agricultural economics.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get drafted, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what happened there?
Okay, well, let's see. First of all, I went to college to be an engineer. But I had so much fun during freshman orientation week, spent so much money that I couldn't buy the equipment that was necessary to do drawing classes and all. And so I went into agricultural economics. Now I'll tell you though, a lot of my engineering friends, they were pre-agricultural economics. Okay, so anyway, I really enjoyed farming, and that's what I wanted to do. But during my senior year, then, you know, it was Vietnam. I knew I would get drafted, but I had started flying, and I needed to get a few more hours before I could qualify to be and get in a military program. Sure. And I got drafted before that happened. So I had to go to the draft board and say, hey, I've got this private pilot license. Will you give me a couple more months to find a program, which they did.
Right. Oh, great. And so I was doing some digging more. You flew, you know, carrier missions in Vietnam, correct? Yep. Also, I read here you flew cover for the helicopters during the Saigon embassy evacuation.
That's correct. It was called.
How was that?
So it was called Operation Frequent Wind. There were 4 aircraft carriers involved. and many other ships and stuff. And so there were quite a few of the evacuations that had already taken place in an orderly fashion, you know, from Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base. But now the North Vietnamese had completely broken through, and they were coming down Highway 1 from Da Nang and just north of Saigon. And so now it was time we had to get, you know, the emergency, get people out of there, because a lot of those people had helped us out throughout this war. And of course, some of them were actually our own employees at the embassy and so on. So there were really two pickup points, Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base and the embassy. And so when the helicopters would come off, the two carriers, which was the Hancock and the Midway, the Coral Sea and the Enterprise, we kept our regular air wings on board. I was on Enterprise. The other two were nothing but helicopters. And so when they would come by this Coast Guard island they had called Vung Tau, then a section of us, like A7s or A6s or whatever type airplanes, would then take each helicopter, and we'd stay over the top of them as they went in to make the rescue, in case they got shot at. Because if they did, we would shoot back.
Right, and it wasn't so much of a Vietnamese like air threat, but more from the ground, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Amazing. Also, going a little faster here into your career, I was reading about. Well, first off, what were you thought when you sent your application in to become the Blue Angels flight leader?
Well, I didn't send in an application. I was suggested from a couple of ex-Blue Angels that called me and it was very flattering. They said, you know, we think you should apply to be the flight leader. And I go, well, I never even thought about doing that. And so they said, yeah, you really need to think about doing that. So after the second one called me, I said, okay, I'll go ahead and apply. And then there were 13 of us that applied. And all of us had already been in command of a squadron on an aircraft carrier. Very competitive then. And so for whatever reason, they cut it down to 6. And then we all went down and interviewed. And when you do the interview process, it's pretty intense. Okay, and there's an admiral there as the final interview. And the only jump that I had on the others, if any, was that I was actually a recruiter. I had a tour as a recruiter. And I used that, as I said, you know, when the admiral asked me, why should I pick you, besides the fact you're the only one that didn't shave his mustache off? Geez, I had this big red mustache.
I was gonna bring that. I heard that in another interview where you're the only guy who showed up with a huge mustache.
Well, the mustache, right? And everybody else, because the Blues are all clean shaven. And I thought, I'm never going to get this job, so I'm not going to take my mustache off and have to regrow that. But anyway, so the selection process, about a month later, they actually called me. And when the admiral called me, he said, well, I've called all the rest of the guys, and you're the final call. I went, what? And he goes, yes, you're the flight leader of the Blue Angels. Well, I almost fainted, you know. And he said, but shave that mustache off before tomorrow. So I did.
So you've flown many planes in your career, from the F-18 Hornet, the A4 Skyhawk, Corsair A7, F-14 Tomcat. Do you have a favorite?
I love them all. You know, I think you jump from one to the next. The A4 had a 700 degree a second roll rate. It was like a hot motorcycle. You just strapped it on. The A7 was the best bomber that I had. I flew that in Vietnam. Really good airplane. I have about 3,000 hours in that. That's the most time I have. And then the F-14, I only got to fly twice. And of course, it was a terrific machine, you know, 2,000 mile an hour machine, and really enjoyed those 2 flights. And then the F-18 was the last one I flew, of course, with the Blues. And then I also flew it when I was the captain of the aircraft carrier. So I got my last landing on an aircraft carrier at the age of 50. I was an old geezer.
Let's go back to aircraft carrier. I mean, you know, you see all the clips, the old clips of, you know, planes taking off from carriers. Yeah. You hear about, you know, World War II, many missions, bombers, you know, the bombers taking out. How hard is it to take off from a carrier? Scary, I would imagine, maybe your first time. Try to explain, like, exactly how hard it is.
2 completely different worlds called day and night. The day cat shots going off there, 0 to 160 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds. Awesome. The best ride you've ever had, you know, bungee jump, whatever it is, this is the best it ever gets. At night, it's the worst, most awful experience in the world, because think about it. You're going from 0 to 160 in 2.5 seconds. You cannot see the instrument panel. You know, boom, and then it drops you off 60 feet above the water, and you're flying instruments right there, and you have to climb away from the water. So, two very different worlds. The same way with landings. The landings in the daytime are fun, you know, and the ones at night are just awful. They're really, really hard. And
I would imagine maybe, I don't know, but more, did you do more of one? More night?
More day than night.
More days?
About
okay.
2/3 day and a third night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like you've dedicated your life, you know, a life of service through military, through other, you know, as you look back, I want to know, give me a couple of your fondest, proudest memories.
Yeah, I think certainly the Blue Angel thing was a heck of an experience, the whole thing. The Fargo Air Show was fantastic. We flew the Fargo Air Show that one year, 1986, and then we flew Grand Forks in 1988. And both of those two experiences allowed me to come back to my home, you know, and you go from being the boss of the Blue Angels, you know, to being that farm kid from North Dakota again, which that's the best memories I have. And of course, being a captain of an aircraft carrier with, you know, basically 2,500 people working directly for you, another 2,500 when they come aboard with the air wing and still flying off of it. I mean, my very last flight in the Navy, you know, was when I left the commanding officer of the carrier. Yeah, I made that flight, made my last trap, and I was gone. You know, it doesn't end any better than that.
I bet.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about your Blue Angels experience? Maybe a few different, you know, just give me a couple more things about what you guys went through.
Yes. So the Blue Angels, we start, you know, in El Centro, which is an Imperial Valley, and it's much like the Red River Valley, only it's warmer. And the sun shines all the time, and there's no flooding. But other than that, it's very similar. Farm people. All around, they farm right up to the runways, and I was so at home there. A lot of my friends were ag pilots, you know, that lived in the area there, but we fly extremely intense training, you know, 2, sometimes 3 times a day, 6 days a week out there flying, and it's extremely physically debilitating when you first start. Because in a Blue Angel airplane, you have to actually pull 30 pounds worth of pressure just to get the stick to neutral. Okay, and so your wrists are sore, and if people think we do a lot of partying and stuff. Well, we do absolutely none when we're training out there because it's so intense. A lot of workout, a lot of weightlifting, things like that, because we do not use G-suits. You know, so yeah.
What about the camaraderie between the whole team?
Huge.
Did you love your guys?
Oh,
obviously.
Huge. Yeah, huge. I mean, we still to this day, we get together all the time, you know, and. Yeah, it's a brotherhood. I would equate it. I played quite a bit of sports, and you know, like a sports team. You know, you're together and you go through some highs and lows, and the Blues are like that to the extreme. You know, and I mean, here's a guy who's been flying 36 inches away from me for 3 years. You know, so there's an awful lot of trust involved there, and it's something that you never forget, and you have these memories to share, you know, like, for instance, 30 minutes with President Ronald Reagan, you know. I mean, just him and us, him telling stories. And by the way, he was exactly the same in person as he was on television or anything else, just a gregarious, great guy.
Were you the one, did he do up with you guys? Up in the
No, he
air?
didn't
Oh,
go
okay.
up with us, but what he did was, after we met with him in 1988, then he said, just as we were leaving, he looks at his chief of staff, Senator Howard Baker from Tennessee, and he says, hey, Howard, he said, wouldn't it be a good idea here, boss here flew over the Rose Garden tomorrow morning and sent me off to talk to Gorbachev? And, you know, when he said, wouldn't it be a good idea, our guys were already out the door, you know, heading to make the coordination for all that.